Hello and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer. A show where we discuss different styles of beer, beer history, beer flavor profiles. We give shout outs to breweries we think make exceptional beer, and we talk about whatever else happens to come to mind during the course of the conversation. If you like what I'm doing, if you appreciate the kind of edutainment that I am providing, I would appreciate if you could click like and subscribe and maybe click the little bell to be notified when new episodes come out because, well, this here is a new episode, so you might not know when it comes out. Without further ado, I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. So joining me today is one of my internet buddies from Twitter. This is Jerry Hulla. Jerry, if you could tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into craft beer, and what you do when you're not drinking or talking about craft beer.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, Rob. So I think I got into craft beer a little bit in college. I think I got exposed to it, but it was in my past life of coaching. I spent over 30 years coaching athletics, women's volleyball, and I had a friend who was really into craft beer. And interestingly enough, it was one of those things where he's like, well, let me pick beers for you. You know, you're not going to really know what you want. And he's like, but one of the things I do know is you're not going to like IPAs. So I'm going to pick beers for you. And flash forward to now, the irony of the fact that since I joined Untapped in 2015, I have over 1,300 different IPA check-ins. I don't think that friend knew what he was talking about.
You kids and your IPAs, I tell you.
Yeah,
what.
and the funny thing is, it was that, but now I would say probably since the pandemic moving forward, I got IPAs, but I just really don't drink that many anymore. I mean, I'm into the clean classic styles and into trying different types of styles and beers, and so he wasn't 100% right, but it was interesting. Shifted from coaching to craft beer, wanted to do more with craft beer in the industry. So I started my own podcast called Share a Pint and started that in November 2019 and ran bi-weekly for about a year and a half. And then I took a job in the industry at an undisclosed brewery that's very large on the East Coast in the top 25 size and production. And now I just literally can't do podcasts right now because of the hours that I work. So there you go.
Gotcha. So it went from coaching volleyball to being in the beer industry. That's it's a little bit of a swing in careers there, my friend.
Yeah, kind of like I've changed lives. It's my second life, I guess.
Awesome. Well, you talk about how you've had so many IPAs. Regular listeners and all my friends know I'm not much of an IPA guy. If I'm going to drink an IPA, it's going to be an old school, traditional English IPA. That's the only one that I recognize as an IPA. The rest of them are just, they're fads.
Yeah.
You can keep your juicy, hazy, nebulous, super frothy, fruity East Coast stuff, and you're so bitter it makes my whole face want to pucker West Coast stuff. Just give me the old school traditional, man. That's I'm a big malt backbone beer kind of guy, so I tend to gravitate towards the heavier malt bills as opposed to the heavier hop bills. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. And like I said, during the pandemic, I shifted and got a lot more away from the IPAs that I'd been drinking, which again is ironic because the brewery that I work at pretty much just cranks out IPAs. Every once in a while, they'll crank out something different, and I'm like, yay! And we're like, oh, you just do IPAs. And so, yeah, I feel your pain.
Yeah. So do you live on the East Coast now that you're working for a brewery?
Yeah, I do. My family's in Maryland. I was born and raised and grew up in Maryland, and then obviously with coaching was moving all over the country.
Right.
But stepped out of coaching and moved back into the Maryland area for family, and that's when I kind of shifted and said, oh, I've always had this passion for craft beer. I've done some home brewing. I really like to get into the industry. Let's see what happens. And that's how the podcast kind of came about. And from the podcast, made enough connections and things to get me the job that I'm at currently.
Nice. So without disclosing too much, are you in the production, the distribution, or the sales aspect of?
I am in production. Yes, I'm in production. And I will throw more of a tidbit out that while I live in Maryland, the brewery I work at is out of state. So I do a lot of back and forth travel, spend a lot of time on the road to and from work. So.
No worries. I mean, I'm not going to ask you who you work for if you don't want to disclose it. If you don't feel it's appropriate, that's perfectly fine. I'm just kind of wondering what your role is,
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of a frame of reference for when we're having our conversation. All right. So today's conversation is going to be on German style Helles lagers. For people who don't know, Helles actually just means pale. So it should be like a nice pale yellow to a light golden yellow color. It should have, I don't know, it should have pretty low bitterness. I think they're typically 15 to 25 or so for IBUs. And alcohol also is going to be fairly low, somewhere in the 4.5 to 6% range, unless they're getting crazy with it and trying to push the envelope a little far. For people who are interested in this sort of thing, the proper glassware is a fluted glass, and proper serving temperature is 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 10 to 12 and a half degrees Celsius for my metric friends. And this is one of those great beers for beer lovers. It's if you like a classic beer flavored beer, a Helles lager is the thing to go to. So today I am going to be drinking one that's local to me here in Ontario. I am drinking one from Wellington Brewing. It's their Wellington Helles lager.
Nice. I will be having the oldest brewery in Germany, Weinstefaner, going with their Helles.
And not a bad choice by any stretch of the means.
Well, thank you.
There's a reason why
I sadly do not have
long.
the proper glassware like you do. But I do have this really cool Nordic drinking mug. So
there you go.
Maybe it'll offset the.
Well, proper glassware is fine, and it will add to the experience because it's designed around the style of beer and everything. But I always say a good beer is a good beer no matter what glass it's in. If it's in the proper glassware, if it's in improper glassware, if it's right out of the can, if it's in a red Solo cup, if it's a good beer, it's a good beer.
Sounds good.
So I get off of this. It's pretty low hop aroma. I mean, almost non-existent on this one. And obviously it only uses the noble style hops, and with the low amount of hopping that's done to this style of beer, you're not going to get a whole lot of aroma. You should get a little bit of like a bready or crackery aroma with it as well. And you should also get that in the flavor. I mean, you should have, it should be reminiscent of fresh, light bread, not your heavy brown breads, but like a whiter bread, or like a light rye style, that lighter style of breads. You shouldn't really have any fruity or floral esters coming off of it, and there shouldn't be any spicy, peppery type things going on either. It should just be a nice, clean beer.
Mm-hmm.
Which is exactly what this is. And with the temperatures that we've been experiencing in North America here lately, it is more than welcome to have a nice, crisp, clean, light beer.
Absolutely.
So you were a coach for women's volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
What level were you at? Were you at the collegiate level? Were you at the high school level? Were you at the co-ed rec center level?
For over 30 years of coaching, I've pretty much coached every level there is, all levels of college here in the U.S., all 3 levels of NCAA, NAIA, JUCO, high school club, and then internationally, I coached at an Olympic level as well for the Paralympics.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. All right, so I didn't mention it earlier. I did mention that it should be like a pale to a golden color. I mean, if you look at this one,
Mm-hmm.
It is a golden color. I mean, it looks really yellow right now on the screen to me, but in person, it's more of a dark golden color. It's completely clear, so it should be clear to brilliantly clear. And the carbonation on this is true to form. So lots of little bubbles, but not like being due to like dirty glasses or nicked ware. There should just be medium carbonation to the visuals, and it should be that way in your mouth too. It shouldn't be overly carbonated. It should be a nice light carbonation on this one. Excuse me a second. Mm-hmm. Problem with beer is carbonation.
Exactly.
So if you had to pick if you had to pick one style of beer that you would say currently is your favorite, what would it be?
Wow, good question. Now I might have broad stroked this with my answer, but I'm gonna go with lagers. Um,
Yeah.
I just it was really interesting when I talked with Zach Rissmiller at 1623 Brewing. They're in Eldersburg, just outside of Westminster, so here in Maryland. He has grown up brewing 10 plus some years in Colorado, which is kind of a mecca for craft beer.
It really
And
is.
he's won a lot of medals, GABF, World Beer Cup, things like that, for clean classic styles, Hefeweizens, Pilsners, things like that. And it was during my interview with him about a couple years ago that he said, when I go into a brewery, the first thing I'm going to want to try is a clean classic style, a lager, a Pilsner, something like that. He said, because you can't hide behind that. He said, if you have
That's
brewing
right.
flaws, if you have technical, he said, you just can't dump a bunch of adjuncts into it like a stout or an IPA and hop your way out of it. He said, you're going to know. He said, so I'll go for a clean classic style. And if it's a good beer, then chances are everything else the brewery does is going to be a good beer. And it was weird. It just, the way he said it with his background, and it hit me like an epiphany. And I was like, well, of course. So ever since then, that's pretty much how I approach walking into breweries. And so now I've gone back to, wow, I really like these clean crisp styles, these classic lagers, that you can drink a few of, as opposed to maybe those haze boys or heavy adjuncted stouts where you're like, one or two and I'm good for the day. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you?
So it's funny. I have that same exact approach because I've been brewing home brewer for 15 or so years. I've done collaboration brews with the other breweries. I've helped breweries come up with recipes. So same exact thing. I walk in and I want to look and see, and if they happen to have like a traditional lager or a pilsner or something like that on their lineup, I will try that first, because you
Mm-hmm.
can't hide behind it, because the grain bill is so simple on that it will show every flaw.
Yep.
And if they make a good one of those, yeah, you're right. Yeah, if that's good, then chances are the rest of their beers are good. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one to shy away from adding adjuncts and things if I have a brew that goes sideways for me, but it is what it is. If you're making something like that, you can't hide behind it. You might as well not even present that if it's going to be funky. So
Right, right. I'd agree. And since we're kind of, we're talking about German beers, when I did my first collab with Smoketown Brewing, and they were the first guest on our show back in 2019, so that's why I picked them. I said, hey, how about a Keller beer? And they were like, oh, well, we've never done that before. And I said, yeah, I really like that style. It's a young lager, it's an unfiltered lager. I said, I just really like that. I said, I don't see enough of them around. So why don't we do that with hibiscus? And they were like, oh, we've never used hibiscus either. So that was it was an exciting collab that went really, really well, but kind of fits into our theme of light, easy drinking German style beers.
nice. So people who might be interested, Helles lagers and typically most lagers for food pairings. If you're looking for something a little bit on the exotic side, you could go with samosas. If you're looking for a cheese, it goes well with like a Colby or a Jack. And if you're looking for a sweet dessert type thing to go with it, you can't go wrong with baklava. For your knowledge, if you don't know, and for people who might just be tuning in their first time, I am a certified beer nerd. I'm a low level certified beer nerd. I haven't made it all the way to the top yet. But one of the things that we did talk about was pairings, and
Mhm.
how to figure out what beers go with what. So I always try and give at least a few options if people want to try things with foods. Um, you know. Uh, Here in Canada, they don't have the Cicerone program like they have in the States. It's called Prodome, but
Mhm.
it's an analog to it. Um, and I've got my level 1 certification in that, which is called Beer Enthusiast, and I mean that's definitely what I am. And it's pretty cool. So the level 1 certification actually focuses more on the social aspects of beer,
Hmm.
which I thought was rather interesting. So, it's trying to make beers more approachable and being able to describe beers in language that everybody would understand.
I think that's great. I mean, that's a nice approach because we'll just say that there are some breweries, and I think the attempt is to make it approachable by describing it. but it's often comes across as pretentious with, well, we taste this, this, and this in this beer. And I'm like, well, everyone's palates are really different. So if I don't taste that, do I not enjoy the beer? Do I not know what I'm talking about? Whatever. So
Right.
it sounds very cool that they're saying, hey, let's find ways to have an approachable language and get more people into this craft beer.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was. I thought it was a fantastic way to do it. So you don't focus on like super specific flavors. You're like, oh well, this one you should taste. It should taste kind of like a biscuit or like bread.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, oh, this one tastes more like whole wheat bread as opposed to white bread. But that's about as far as you really need to go, just to try and get people so they have something that they're familiar with, that they can go, oh, I know what that kind of tastes like. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
might actually like this beer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we overcomplicate things in the craft beer world, and we're like, hey, just keep it simple. It's like coaching. We're like, just keep it simple. Don't make it overcomplicated for your athletes. Let them play the game. And so, yeah, very similar.
Yeah. Follow the KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid.
Absolutely.
So you might have mentioned this, and I might have missed it because sometimes I'm trying to think of things to say while my guests are talking, which I know is a terrible trait. How long have you been in the beer industry?
Well, I would say probably you kind of consider the podcast and everything. So probably really 2019. I would say
Okay,
that.
so
Yeah.
only the last few years.
Yeah,
Okay.
still relatively new. Having a love of craft beer and doing home brewing, nowhere near the scale that you do. It was been this long-standing love of craft beer, but to quote unquote be in the industry, I would say probably the podcast 2019 moving forward, and as November. So yeah, just a few years really.
Awesome. So and I assume you're enjoying your stint here in craft in the beer world.
I am enjoying the craft beer world. I'm not sure if I've quite found the niche that I enjoy. I think that I would probably enjoy the brewing side more, but I know that I don't have enough of the background and experience to necessarily pick up a job along that lines. So production, I'm close enough, and a lot of people cross over, so that could happen.
Yeah.
But I do think that I haven't quite found the niche that will make me the most happy in this industry.
Well, if you don't have enough experience to get the job brewing beer, you could always just start your own brewery. It didn't stop tons of other people out there.
That's true. That's true. But I do have enough of a business acumen to know how horribly that can fail. So I would really, if it goes that way down the road, which I do have a friend who would really like to see that happen. I said, oh, there's so much more knowledge I need to acquire before we actually put real money versus monopoly money up for this.
Right. No, yeah, totally get it. My wife and I looked at starting a brewery here in Ontario. It was actually when I moved here from the States. I had retired from my job, and the plan was I was going to open a brewery.
Mm-hmm.
And then I discovered how many hoops you have to jump through here in Ontario to open a brewery and be able to sell and distribute. And I had a fair amount of money earmarked for it, and I found out it was only about half to maybe a third of what I actually would have needed to get everything up and running. And I was like, you know what, screw this, I'm just going to have a kick-ass home brewery.
And I will say, for your viewers probably know from following you on social media and everything, but I'm very impressed with the home brewing situation that you have and the new equipment that you got recently, and it's very impressive. I mean, I know some small nano breweries, if you would, down here in Maryland, one barrel brewing systems and things, where I'm like, you're right there brewing with them. You're basically a brewery.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I had the head brewer from Lake of Bays Brewing on, and we were talking about my new system. And he's like, yeah, that's better than what we started with for the business at Lake of Bays. We were still using propane burners and 30-gallon buckets and things like that when we started. I'm like, well, I figured if I was going to have a home brewery, I was going to have a really good home brewery.
Yeah. It's nice. Like I said, I've seen pictures on social media. It's nice, and I love the logo and the branding that you have for it. It's sharp.
Yeah, so the logo and the branding was from the brewery that we were going to start. We had gotten far enough that we had incorporated We had we'd done the name search and gotten our name trademarked and gotten a logo trademarked. So even though we decided not to go forward with the rest of the brewery, I kept all that stuff, and now was just what I use for all my personal stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I see it right up there above the screen with us, and I'm like, it really stands out. I like it.
Yeah. So for those who might not be familiar, if you go through my social media post and you see the logo, it's Cthulhu, who is one of my favorite weird science fiction characters from my favorite author of H.P. Lovecraft.
Mhm.
And then he's rolling a 20-sided die, and it's come up on a 20, which in role-playing games and tabletop games is called a critical hit.
Mhm.
So that was going to be the name of the brewery, was Critical Hit Brewing. So that's what we still use for the homebrew stuff, and we just like the logo enough that we kept it.
That's awesome. That's great. It's a great story too. I love it. That's part of what I really enjoyed doing with my podcast. Was I was like, tell me your unique and interesting stories in the craft brewing industry, things that you're not going to see on a website or you don't necessarily know by walking in the brewery. Things that are really going to endear people to your brewery and understand your story and your journey. So I had to ask, and I was like, tell me about this logo and this home brewing system. That's awesome, Rob.
Yeah. Yeah, so and just to keep things rolling, even for the homebrew stuff, I've got a friend who I met via social media here in Ontario, who's an illustrator for children's books, and he actually does all my beer logo labels for me.
Nice.
So like when I do a new brew, I'll say, "Hey, I'm looking for a label," even though I'm not canning everything. Everything goes in kegs, but I do display what I have on tap in my my garage area up on a big screen, so people can see what it is. And he designs all my logos for me, and they're absolutely fantastic.
That's really cool. And now that you say that, I can see that slightly cartoonish nature to it that has that kind of whimsical quality to it. When I don't think anyone would say whimsical and Cthulhu in the same sentence, but he's managed to pull that off.
That's right. Yeah. So when we were looking to open the brewery, it was going to be nerd based.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the beer recipes and everything that we came up with were standard style recipes, but all the names were based on things that we like. So, like I have several beers that are Cthulhu named. I've got a whole series from the Fallout video game, because that's my favorite Fallout. Fallout is my favorite video game franchise. So a lot of my beers have the Fallout stuff. All the stuff that was brewed because my wife likes that style has Lord of the Rings names.
Nice.
So we've got like Bilbo's Best Bitter and Pippin and Mary's Belgian Ale and things like that. So we were just playing around with all that kind of stuff, and it's nice, even if you're just doing stuff at home. Giving your beer an actual name kind of makes it feel more legitimate.
Yeah. No, I agree, and you're right in my wheelhouse. My dad raised us on sci-fi, fantasy. So growing up reading Tolkien, yeah. So that's very cool. I can definitely relate to all of that, and maybe one day the brewery will actually be more than just coming out of your garage, and I will have to drive to Canada to visit.
Yeah, we were so we were talking about it, and one of the other things that we decided that it was probably a good idea that we didn't open a brewery is because we actually like to travel and take vacations, and when you're starting a new business, pretty much the first 5 or so years, that's off the table.
Right.
You can't take time off. You have to be there for the business and get everything off the ground. So that's another reason why it's probably a better idea that we just have a really nice home brewery.
Yeah. Yep. More reasons to have people over. Between that and the beautiful backyard that you have with the pool and the barbecue and all, I mean, you definitely have a setup to host.
Yeah, well, what's funny is we were just able to have our first barbecue in like 3 years because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So, we kept it fairly small. I think we had 25 people over, which it seems like a lot of people, but I have a large yard. Yeah. I have a very large lot. I have a 3/4 of an acre in my backyard. So, people were able to spread out, and nobody had to be super close to each other if they didn't feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And we had tons of chairs and things like that. But it was really nice to finally actually have people over again. And, because the house we bought it because we like to entertain. So it's a big open concept, free flowing, thing. And well, it's just been my wife and I for going on 3 years now.
Yeah. No, that is good. I mean, any return to normalcy that we can get, or whatever the new normal is going to be, I'm all for it.
Yep.
So,
yeah. And like I said, we invited several people over, but everyone we invited were people that we knew weren't being morons. You know, they were all vaxxed, and most of them were at least one, if not double boosted, and everybody was careful. And you know, nobody had to be sardined next to each other because that's not fun.
Yeah.
You know, so we had people wandering in and out of the house. We had people wandering through the backyard. One of my coworkers brought his kids and they swam in the pool. So yeah, it felt normal again, which was really nice.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Yeah. How many beers do you typically have on tap as a home brewer when you have an event like this? You bring people over.
Yeah, so I have 3 taps. So I have a 10-foot commercial cooler with 3 taps on it. It's 4 doors. So 2 doors are for the keg area, and then the other 2 doors are all shelves for cans and bottles. So I tend to have 3 on tap whenever we have people over. They may or may not be mine. For this barbecue, none of them were mine. They were all from local craft breweries because a lot of the people that were coming weren't really into the craft beer scene. So I was trying to have beers that I knew were approachable for them to try. Because not all the things I brew are approachable for people who are not comfortable with things outside of your lagers. Because I tend to brew like heavy stouts and, you know, quads and doubles and triples and saisons, and people are like, "Oh, this tastes kind of funny." Well, yeah, okay, I can see where you would think it would taste funny if you're coming from like Coors Lights and Miller Lite and things like that. So yeah, so I had a blonde ale, I had an Irish red, and I had an ESB on tap for the barbecue.
That's another style that I don't see done often enough. That I really enjoy is a nice ESB. Yeah. So I'm very fortunate in this area. There are some breweries here that make it on the regular, and they make fantastic ones. There's a brewery in Burlington, Ontario called Nickelbrook that makes a fantastic one called Equilibrium, which is one I had on tap. And then there's another brewery also in Hamilton called Clifford. They make one called the Dark Streets of London, which is very reminiscent, if you've ever had Fuller's ESB, very reminiscent of a Fuller's. So it's same exact flavor profile. It's absolutely fantastic. So I'm spoiled for choice up here when it comes to things like that, because a lot of the breweries up here make great English style beers. Because, I mean, Canada's got that whole UK connection and things like that. So yeah, that's awesome.
I'm switching it up. I finished off my Hellas, and now I'm switching over to Chain Link, which is a Vienna lager from Clifford Brewing, the one I was just talking about, that makes the great ESB.
Nice. Yeah,
so,
I will probably move to the
Bittner.
Actually, I'll probably go Bitburger Pilsner after this, but I'm still enjoying my Hellas. It was really nice. I mean, I'm not surprised. It's Weihenstephaner, but it's a very clean, very crisp, maybe a little bit of a hint of a floral note, but just a really light, easy drinking, clean beer. So good. It was a good choice.
Yeah. Well, I finished mine a little fast because so my recording booth is it's a converted closet. Oh, hey, my camera.
I remember seeing the pictures on that, so it's probably a little warm in there.
It's a little warm in here. Yeah, it's I mean, it's probably 85 degrees Fahrenheit in here right now.
Rob, you need to put a fan in. I mean, somewhere out of the camera view, just put a fan in.
It's in the plan. So this closet space actually backs up to my house has a full basement and 2 crawl spaces, and this closet actually happens to back up to one of the crawl spaces, which is always nice and cool. So the plan is to put a fan up above me as my camera tracks my hand up. To put a fan up above me that's pulling air from that crawl space to blow it through. The problem is trying to find one that's quiet enough, because I don't want it to be picked up by the microphone. You know, I've switched to a dynamic microphone, which is great for blocking a lot of that ambient noise in and of itself. But I think what I'm going to end up doing is buying like 3 or 4 smaller computer fans, the super quiet computer fans, and putting them in the ceiling to blow down to keep it cooler in here. And then it'll be nice and quiet, because those things, you know, like the Noctua brand ones, are super quiet. You can't even hear them when they're running full bore.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering with the green screen kind of setup behind you, I was wondering what kind of setup we were going to get, if you're going to have some beautiful mountains projected back there, or forest.
No, so I bought that I bought that originally for doing virtual backgrounds and things like that, but right now all it is doing is hiding my winter coats because they're still hanging behind me. The plan is to take the rest of the closet stuff out of here and put shelves and put all my weird tech and geek tchotchkes behind me, so when I'm recording I have an interesting background. But for right now, it's a nice boring green background.
That'll be fun when you have all of your toys in the background behind you.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me about the beer you're drinking now, the Vienna Lager.
So this is a Vienna Lager, and this one is very true to style. It's got a nice bit of caramel in the flavor. Again, it's another one that's a heavy malt profile. So it's bready. It's got caramel. It's sweet. There's no real bitterness to this one. You might get a tiny bit of it on the finish. It comes in. It's this nice. Well, on camera it looks more golden, but in person it's got more of like an amber hue to it. It's got a bright white, brilliant foam and sticks around a little bit. It has decent legs on the glass. Again, it comes in I think like 4.5%. So it's another one you can drink a few of them and not feel overly guilty about.
Right. Well, that's good. Vienna Lager, admittedly for me, not a style that I drink a lot of. I'm not as heavily into the malted backbones of the beers that you are. I mean, I do enjoy a good Oktoberfest and on Marzen, but for me, if it's really heavily malted, too deep in the caramel, it becomes a little sweet. So for me, a lot of Vienna Lagers I have just a little too sweet for me, but maybe I haven't found the right one.
Yeah, well, no. To be fair, I mean that's typical of the style. It's going to be a sweeter beer. I mean, it's designed that way on purpose to be a more sweet beer, but it's still got a nice clean finish to it, which is nice. So you get that sweet caramel in your mouth, and then it disappears rather quickly. Again, this one pairs well with this one actually pairs really well with burgers, and so red meats and things like that. It pairs well with sharp cheddar cheese, and for dessert, if you're trying to complement it, it pairs well with like a nice shortbread cookies or even like a I don't know, like a vanilla cake.
Okay,
something like that. It would go well with.
Nice. Oh, good. Well, we're staying in our German theme. I am a huge fan of Rauch beers, which is it's a hard line. It's a hard line, Rob. When I talk to people, they're either like, "Oh, I really love that too," or most of the time it's, "Oh, that's terrible. I hate that." It's like I'm being at a campfire. I have a cigarette ashtray in my mouth, and I was like, "What beer are you drinking that tastes like a cigarette ashtray?" So.
All right. Yeah. No. There's a brewery in Toronto called Muddy York that makes one called Jailfire, which is probably one of the best rock beers I've ever had that isn't from a German brewery.
Oh, beautiful. Following all the Reinheitsgebot, all the German purity laws.
Yeah. So, rock beers are great. One of my other favorites is Eisbach.
Yes.
I don't know if
hard to find, very hard to find, or at least down here it is.
It's a hard to find style in most places. There's a place in Ottawa that makes one. It only comes out once every 5 years because it's a pain in the ass to make. I mean, well, you have to make all your wort, and then you have to basically bring it down to freezing temperatures and take a lot of the ice off. So then so it gets rid of the water in it to make it higher alcohol content, and it's a pain in the butt to do. So they don't do it because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of places that don't make lagers because lagers take a lot of time, and time is money when you're a small brewery.
Right. When I talk with brewers, especially in the second season, we added a different segment on the back end where the front end used to be more of, about the brewery and their history and different things like that. And then the back end was more about them personally and what they do within the brewery and their background and all. And then I had a friend, Rob, up in Canada, and now he's in Alaska. His wife's in the Canadian Air Force, so they move around a lot. And he had suggested what he called straight from the tap. And there were 7 rapid fire questions. And I kind of adapted that and used it. And one of the questions that I will ask is, what style do you wish more people appreciated, drank, or brewed? And almost 100% of the time, the brewers are saying lagers. and almost 80% of the time, their brewery is not brewing any lagers. And the conversation is, what, you love this beer, but you don't brew any. And they're like, well, we don't have the tank space. And so we can't.
Yep.
And I'm like, I understand that. But again, with your point about the Canadian Ice Bock, I'm like, it's cold enough up there. You'd think they'd brew that a lot.
You would think, yeah, you could throw it out in the Canadian ice box out in the backyard and call it a done deal. But yeah, lagers are one of those things that smaller breweries, either they're going to do it or they're not. If they're going to do it, that's pretty much all they're going to do, because a standard ale you can knock out in anywhere from 7 to 13 days and have it ready to drink. Whereas a lager, 7 to 13 days, you're only about a third of the way through, my friend.
Right. That's why I tried to find that happy medium when we brewed that Keller beer, because I was like, well, it's the happy medium. It's a young lager. You don't have to let it sit as long. But yeah.
Yeah, and lagers are one of those things like that are like most beers. When you find a place that does them well, that tends to be what they really specialize in, because lagers can be hard to do. And if you're going to be doing a lot of lagers, then you're going to be spending a lot of your time on that. You're not going to they're not going to brew as many other beers, because they're spending so much time babysitting beers for a month and a half at per batch.
Yeah. Very true.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jerry, we've been talking for 36 minutes. This is the part where I go, hey, this is the end of the show. If people want to find you out on the interwebs, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I appreciate that, Rob. They go to the website is shareapintpodcast.com. The only social media that I do is Twitter, and that's share_pint. Everybody's like, oh, you got to get on Instagram, you get on Facebook, you got to do this. And I'm like, I'm a one-man band and just don't have the time for it. So I try to keep it under something that I can manage. We do have video versions of the show on YouTube. I would say that our show is a lot different than what people would expect for a craft beer show video-wise. It's much more like a television show. Multiple angles, and I shoot a lot of B-roll. So, but we were talking about your backyard and your brewing system. I would have pictures of that we would cut to, and people could see what's going on and all. So I really try to give people a visual impression of what the breweries are like and things like that. So that's been very enjoyable for people to say, oh, I don't live anywhere near Maryland, but this brewery I would love to go visit if I came by, or I went down to Georgia and filmed an episode there, and they're like, wow, that was beautiful. It was like a movie set. It looked like a Midwestern, log cabin from Minnesota or Wisconsin. I was like, that's what they were going for. It's really pretty, isn't it? And they're like, yeah. So I try to give people a little bit more of an experience that they won't get from just going to a website, or if they can't visit the brewery itself. So.
Man, you're all fancy and stuff. Here I am just sitting in a damn closet with a green curtain behind me.
Hey, whatever works, right, Rob?
That's right. That's right. Awesome. Well, this episode will be out, I think, the last week of August, I think, is when it's slated for this episode to go out. So, until then, Jerry, it's been fantastic. And everyone who's watched, I appreciate it. Until next time. I'm Rob from the Internet.
Prost.
Cheers.